Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Sorry guys that I've been a little bit absent here lately. I haven't uploaded any videos in a little while, but I have been using some of the time to work at bringing you guys better content. I've been thinking about a lot of new ideas, so there's going to be some new things coming very soon. Today though, we're going to be taking a look at Sony's new RX100 Mark IV. Now, whenever this camera came out, obviously I was excited. As you guys know, I am a big fan of the RX100 series of cameras. I reviewed the first one. I kind of skipped over the second one because I didn't really, I don't know, I'm not really sure why I skipped over the second one. But anyways, I also did a review on the RX100 Mark III as well. And of course, now we're looking at the RX100 Mark IV. We even looked at the Canon PowerShot G7X, which is kind of a competitor to this series of cameras. Now, yeah, sorry Canon fanboys and girls, but Sony, they came to assert their dominance even further with the RX100 Mark IV. This camera is bringing, 4K video internally now, and that is something that's a very big deal. It's absolutely incredible that you can get that type of image quality out of a camera of this size. I already have uploaded a 4K sample that I have shot with this camera. I made a little, I went out to shoot a few samples and then I got way too carried away and ended up making my own little, 4K demo. So I was really impressed with the camera. It was a lot of fun making the video, and I actually learned a lot in the process too. So yeah, it was totally awesome. So anyways, you guys should definitely check out that as well. And it also saves me from having to try to put the same 4K footage in this video. And anyways, so yeah, I've been very impressed with the image quality of the camera. One thing that's the most interesting about this camera to me is that whenever I first saw it, that in Sony's press announcement, I saw that Sony was going to be doing some type of Staggs Sensor technology. And at first I thought, Staggs Sensor technology? Are they talking like, have they gotten away from the Bayer pattern? Is this like some sort of Sigma Foveon type multi-layer technology for actually recording all the color channels separately, or what's going on here? But as it turned out, they meant Staggs Sensor in a little bit different sense. Basically, in order for this camera to be able to shoot 4K video, and it can also do some high-speed video options up to like 960 frames a second. Although it still has to up-convert it to 1080p after that, but more about that later. Anyways, but with all that ability, they obviously needed to have a lot of processing power within the camera, and they needed to be able to get all the data off the image sensor very fast. So what they've actually done is they have taken all the circuitry that reads all the information off the sensor, and they've put it much closer to the pixels. So that way, that data readout can happen much faster. They've also taken some DRAM memory, and they've incorporated that on a layer of the sensor as well. And that acts as a buffer. So once again, when you're shooting high-speed video or when you're shooting 4K, you have plenty of ability to handle all that data. So that's what all that's about. So no, it's not some sort of Foveon technology or something like that like I initially thought it was. But definitely Sony has used this technology to their advantage to be able to shoot very high quality video. And let's see, what else do we have here? This does support SLog 2 Gamma. Now, as I get better at video and cinematography, I'll be talking more and more about this. Basically, it delivers a very flat result out of the camera, so that way you can capture maximum dynamic range. So for all those that want to be able to do a lot of color grading and really get a precise look out of their video, this is basically what SLog 2 Gamma is used for. Now, for my 4K sample video, I actually didn't shoot an SLog Gamma. I basically just shot with the standard profile, and I did do a little bit of minor, color grading in Adobe Premiere, but nothing terribly serious. But as I get more advanced with that, and as I learn more about it, I will do more testing with that for you guys as well. This camera also gives you, speaking of picture profiles, it also gives you some additional presets for video as well. And that's something else that, once again, I'll take a look at in the future. Let's see, what else do we have? And, oh yeah, this camera has an ND filter built in, which is something I made use of on the bright day that I was filming on whenever I made the 4K test video. It is automatic. You can set it to an auto setting so it'll actually compensate for things by itself, which is pretty cool. And let's see here. Most of the other things I will show you whenever we get take a closer look at the camera here. It still uses a 24-70 lens that has an aperture of 1.8 to 2.8. Now on the Canon PowerShot G7X that we looked at, it actually has a little bit more telephoto reach. It goes out to approximately 100 millimeters. And so a lot of people were thinking that this RX100 Mark IV would have a lens that covered more range as well. But you know, guys, you should know what I'm about to say here. Anytime you have a lens that covers more range, it's going to have, it's not going to have as good a performance. It's a lot harder to make a lens cover broad range and let in a lot of light and still be very, very sharp. Versus when we're talking about a lens that covers a smaller range. So it actually doesn't surprise me that Sony decided to stick with the 24-70. You know, they were wanting to get very, very sharp results. Whenever we tested the G7X, it was actually pretty obvious that that lens was not as sharp as the one on the RX100 Mark III. So that's just something to keep in mind. I mean, there's always going to be that trade-off there. And personally, I would much rather have a 24-70 that was sharper than a 24-100 that's not quite as sharp. So despite the early rumors that thought this camera would have more telephoto reach, it is still a 24-70 1.8 to 2.8 lens. Let's see. Okay, that's all the main things right now spec-wise. It is noteworthy to mention that this camera can shoot more frames a second and still, thanks to the new processing and new sensor technology as well. As you guys know, I am not an action type of photographer. You know, as long as the camera can do 4 frames a second, I'm happy. But it is important to note that this camera can now shoot at up to 16 frames per second, whereas the RX100 Mark III was limited to 10 frames a second. So there is a difference there for sure. Unfortunately though, the battery life continues to go the opposite direction. Whenever I tested the RX100 Mark III, I mentioned how it had a little bit less battery life than the Mark II and the Mark I. With the RX100 Mark IV, it's the same story. The RX100 Mark III is rated at about 320 shots per charge. The RX100 Mark IV is rated at 280 shots per charge, so our battery life is going the opposite direction, unfortunately. I still didn't find the battery life too terribly bad, mostly because I found that you can actually use this camera while USB charging it. So whenever I was shooting a lot of my 4K test footage, I actually had the camera plugged into the car while it was filming, so that way I could charge it a little bit as I was filming, and I didn't run into as many battery life issues that way. I did run into some overheating issues. I know that in the 4K test footage, I was like, well, you know, so far I haven't overheated it. And initially I did. You know, on day 1 of me filming, I didn't overheat it at all. But in day 2, whenever I started doing a lot more car shots, especially the shot where the camera is placed right by the wheel well in the car, you know, it's down low. It was close to 100 degrees that day, and it was, you know, the camera was obviously close to the asphalt and everything. So that day I did manage to overheat the camera. I got it and I put it inside the AC, you know, air-conditioned car interior. And after probably about 15 minutes or so, I managed to get it to cool off. I took all the batteries out, took the battery out and took the card out, and let it cool off a while, and it was okay after that. But then later in the day, I overheated it again. So do keep that in mind. There is still some limitation to having all this technology and all this ability in such a small camera body. So just something to keep in mind. I don't think it's a really big issue, but yeah, if you're going to be doing a lot of recording, you know, it's something to keep an eye on. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the camera, and I'll show you what's changed there. Taking a closer look at the camera, the first thing that I am really excited to show you guys is the fact that Sony has solved a problem that the RX100 Mark III had. And that was the fact that if you open the viewfinder and then you decided that you no longer wanted to use it, you couldn't really easily work with that type of scenario on the RX100 Mark III, because as soon as you close the electronic viewfinder, the camera would power off. However, on the RX100 Mark IV, Sony, they've added a new menu option, and this is not enabled by default, but I've gone in here and turned it on. but you can actually go in here and actually change what you want the camera to do when the viewfinder actually closes. So instead of having it power off, you can actually set it to not power off. And apparently, from what I've been told, Sony is going to come out with a firmware update for the RX100 Mark III, so it also will no longer do that anymore. So I think that is awesome. That is the best thing that Sony could have done to change the usability of this camera. A few other things, of course, obviously we've got 4K, and I've been going on about that already. So let's see, we'll take a look at those options. This camera does do the XAVC S codec, and you can do that in either 4K or you can do it in 1080 as well. So you can see our different options there. And of course you can do MP4 as well still. So very, very nice set of codecs. You can do a few different frame rates. Let's see here. Sorry, a couple different bit rates. You've got the ability to do either 60 megabits per second or 100 megabits a second. If you use the 100 megabit a second option, you do need a U3 compatible memory card, so it has to be very, very fast. And to do XAVC S, you have to be using at least a 64 gig card. And that's something that I'm still kind of confused by. Even if you're using a very, very fast 32 gig card, it actually will not work. So yeah, you have to be using a 64 gig card that's U3 compatible if you do 100 megabits a second. And if you do any 4K at all or any XAVC S, even if it's at the lower bit rate, it still has to be at least a 64 gig card. So basically, when it comes to memory cards, this camera is like a really expensive girlfriend. You know, you can't take her to like McDonald's and just chill on a date. You have to do something a little bit better. So that's your options there. This camera also has the ability to do slow motion video. If you're shooting just standard video, you can actually do, see, I'll show you guys here. Switch over to HD. You can actually do up to 120 frames per second, which is actually pretty impressive. So as you can see, you can do up to 120 frames a second when you're doing 1080, and you can do it in either 100 megs or 60 meg stream. But this camera also has a high speed option, and it doesn't capture at the full 1080. It's my understanding that it basically shoots and then it interpolates up to 1080. But in that mode, you can actually do even higher frame rates. You can do either 240, 480, or 960 frames a second. And I'll toss a little bit of slow motion video that I shot in as well, so you guys can see what that's like. Pretty cool option. So Sony decided to use the new processing and the faster, better sensor data throughput, also to allow them to have higher frame rates in addition to 4K, which I think that was a smart idea. So yeah, all in all though, you guys notice that this camera's menu system is pretty much identical to the previous models in this range. This camera does have a built-in ND filter that you can use, which I found very, very helpful when shooting a lot of the very, very bright outdoor scenes that I showed you guys in the 4K test video. All in all, very, very comprehensive package. Unfortunately, there isn't like a microphone input or something like that on this camera. So we have our USB, and then we have our HDMI right here. Apparently, this can output 4K. I haven't really looked to see if you can actually record to an external recorder like the Atomos Shogun, but I may have to give that a go very, very soon as well. All in all, though, very, very comprehensive package. The cool thing about this camera is that you have so much in such a small camera. Now, one thing that a lot of people have already asked me is whether or not I think this camera is worth the cost. And at $949 USD, it's not inexpensive by any stretch of the imagination. However, for a lot of people, that are shooting with other types of cameras, I still think it's a viable secondary camera option. If I were going to spend $950 on a camera, unless I had a very specific purpose in mind,
like for example using this on a drone, which is something I also plan to do in the future. If I were doing something specialized like that, I could see buying it as a primary camera. But otherwise, you're probably better off buying something else as a primary camera, or putting that money towards a lens or something. However, if you've already got a lot of equipment and you want a very, very small camera that has a lot of powerful features as a secondary camera, whether you just want to be able to take a small camera in your pocket and use for high quality videos and stills when you don't want to carry around a big camera, or whether you just want to use this as like a B camera for capturing 4K footage, or think about how I've mounted this camera on the car in positions where I would never put a larger camera. So for things like that, it can be very, very useful, but it's still better left as a secondary camera, in my opinion. This is something that some people may still feel that it's a lot of money even for a secondary camera. But keep in mind, this is still more of a niche product. This is not something that I feel like, a lot of people will buy in great volumes. But the people that do buy it will have a very, very good reason for buying it and a very good purpose for it. And I believe that those people will be very happy. And that's a trend that I've seen with all the other cameras in the RX100 lineup. If you guys have any other questions, just let me know in the comments below. And yeah, as always, if you guys have something specific that you want to see, I can see about doing more testing in the future. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.